So I don't know whether to be petrified at the fact that we finally saw what was at the other end of the exports hallway, or to just take a moment and wipe away the tears in my eyes after that ending, because this was hands down the most beautiful episode that the show's produced. That shot of Gemma's eyes at the end of the episode when Devon asked where Mark went, and it also mirroring what the nurse said to Gemma during the beginning of the episode when she also said, "Gemma, where did you go?" It just made my stomach drop. With an episode that gave us a look into the relationship that's been at the epicenter of the show and the burning love, passion, yet also pain and heartbreak that we saw between Mark and Gemma, who just seemed made for each other. The memories that we got to experience through both of them was just perfect, with hints as to what Cold Harbor could be and us seeing rooms where different personalities and experiences were being adopted. Let's dive headfirst into the episode and discuss all things Severance Season 2 Episode 7. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The meaning of the episode title. Chikhai Bardo was the title of this week's episode, and whilst it was briefly addressed during the runtime when Gemma was completing a task that was sent to her in the mail from the fertility clinic, one which we saw actually had Dr. Mauer there and also the Lumen logo on the top of the document, it was described here by Gemma as the same person fighting ego death. However, I feel it actually goes a lot deeper than that. Chikhai Bardo is one of the 6 traditional Bardo states in the Tibetan Book of Death, and this one specifically is the 4th in total, but the first of the death phase. It's said to be the stage that people enter between life and death, and it can be said to bring people clarity and the clear light of reality. Something that it feels like was at the core of this episode, whether that be for Mark, Gemma, or the both of them. Both of these characters were kind of in a sense of purgatory, or at least a state where they were neither living nor dying. Mark with the fact that he was passed out due to the reintegration process being leveled up, and also Gemma because she was trapped inside of Lumen down the exports hallway and had no way of being able to get outside and back to living her life. All they both had in that moment was this state of being stuck. With the clear light of reality being a focus at the core of the Chikhai Bardo, I think Mark having these newfound memories at the forefront of his mind and the Innie having them too. If the reintegration process was as successful as it should have been, I think we're going to see a different behavior in the character moving forward. The importance of the memories and flashbacks. Honestly, the memories in this episode could be some of my favorite moments from the entirety of the show. Whether it be the way that they were constructed, the style that they had with the grain and its representation of the rawness of the real world compared to inside of Lumen, and just the all-round emotion of love, passion, happiness and togetherness that was at the heart of it, something that I think is linked with Cold Harbor, but we'll talk about why it was so good in a bit. The importance of the scenes is what I want to discuss here. What was important about these flashbacks was that we got to see the relationship of both Mark and Gemma over the course of them meeting each other for the first time several years ago, right up until Mark was met with the police at his doorstep on the night where he was told that Gemma had died in a car crash. But there was a specific moment within it where Gemma had signed her life away and she didn't even realize it. It was after Mark and her had tried for a baby and them sadly losing it, which led them to sign up to a fertility clinic, which seemed to be the very moment that Gemma was plucked out of regular life and when Lumen were able to reach out to her. For example, at around the 21-minute point of the episode, we saw Mark and Gemma walk into the clinic for the first time, and the evil Dr. Mauer was even there, and he actually looked over at her out of the corner of his eye, showing that there was that instant intrigue. Whilst Gemma was there, she filled out some paperwork with her details, which I believe is most likely the way in which Lumen were able to identify her and contact her. And as well as that, she was also receiving these tasks in the mail that she didn't know how she got on the mailing list for. But I suppose it was through that where Lumen identified her as the person that they wanted for their work. This is something that adds an even deeper and darker layer to that of Lumen, because it showed that they were prepared to target somebody that was grieving the loss of their unborn child and was also in a vulnerable state because they were looking for alternative methods to conceive a child. And it was through that filtering where they found Gemma and started keeping her prisoner within the walls of Lumen, whilst making out to the outside world that she died. These tests that she was getting mailed and sent back must have been some kind of criteria that she passed through, which made Lumen decide that it was her that they wanted. These memories and flashbacks that were occurring were happening for both Mark and Gemma, and not only did it provide clarity to us on the state of their relationship and how they were with one another, but it also showed that they were both experiencing these memories and that they were both still inside of the shells that were their bodies, despite being in a different state. The episode opened with the nurse saying, "Gemma, where did you go?" as she was thinking about Mark and their time together on the outside. And the episode concluded with Devon saying, "Mark, where did you go?" when he awoke, wiped a tear away from his face, and had been thinking about his wife, having the exact same memories playing within his head. It was beautiful from start to finish, and these memories being shown to us served multiple different functions, but the connection that they have with one another is something that I think is key to Cold Harbor. This wasn't only the origin of when Mark met Gemma and when their love story blossomed, but it was also the origin of when Lumen met Gemma, something that is obviously extremely important, arguably more important than when she met Mark in the context of the show. What is in exports? The level below the exports hallway was dark, mysterious, and probably the most scary place that we've seen in the entirety of the Lumen building. Within this episode, we finally saw the identity of the person that was collecting the dentistry equipment in episode 5, and it was Dr. Mauer, an individual who seemed to be appearing in many different rooms on that floor and adopting different personas, kind of like how Gemma was, but without his mind actually being taken over. We saw that Gemma was having blood taken from her and that she was tasked with going into 6 different rooms during the day where she had to put on a different outfit for each of them, and Lumen were watching the events unfold and recording the data. I'm guessing that maybe the personality that she'd adopt would be because it would mirror the data in the projects that MDR were completing. It would change whenever she'd go in the room. For example, whether it be a trip to the dentist, experiencing a plane going through extreme turbulence and looking like it was on the cusp of crashing, and even playing Happy Families around Christmas time and writing a letter with her non-dominant hand, as we know from when she filled out the form earlier on. Plus, we did also hear from Mark that she didn't like writing thank you letters, but there she was doing one. Gemma would ultimately feel the repercussions of what happened when back in her own mind, such as a sore hand from writing or discomfort in her mouth from the dentist. This was because when she'd enter the room, it mirrored what happened when severed people went to the severed floor and their innies would appear. However, with Gemma, there were many different versions of herself. There were actually a lot more than 6 rooms too that were on the floor, as there was a hallway that was full of them. Many of the rooms were actual places that existed in the real world, such as Rhodes, which is an island in Greece, Wellington, which is the capital of New Zealand, and Allentown, which is a city in Pennsylvania. These rooms all correlated with folders that members of MDR had previously worked on when refining data. However, with Cold Harbor only being 96% complete, that was the room that we heard Gemma say that was the only one that she'd never been in. This is most likely because Mark hadn't completed it yet. Gemma asked if she'd see Mark once she'd go in there, and Dr. Mauer responded by saying, "You'll see the world again and the world will see you," something which was rather ominous and made no sense for Gemma. With the memories that we saw being at the epicenter of the episode, and Mark obviously being vital to the completion of Cold Harbor, I wonder if the Cold Harbor room could be one that's focused around something to do with children of some kind. Rooms seem to mirror environments and experiences, and we both know that Mark and Gemma experienced the loss of a child during pregnancy, and Lumen were also operating as a fertility clinic in order to get people that had experienced that specific pain, loss, and suffering of not being able to conceive a child. So I wonder if it's going to have something to do with that, and that's why both Mark and Gemma are crucial to its completion. Drummond said that the completion of Cold Harbor would be the greatest achievement the planet had ever seen. So if it comes to creating life in ways that aren't necessarily natural, or if the whole life side of what Mark and Gemma were experiencing is somehow connected to this cloning program where Gemma is the subject of channeling all of the tempers, experiences, and emotions of the baseline clone, that could be the case, and it could also tie into what Dr. Mauer said when he mentioned that the world would see her, because she'd be the first to test them all. It became clear to see in this episode that Dr. Mauer had taken a liking to Gemma and grew close with her over their time together, to the point where Drummond even picked up on it and said that he'd need to say goodbye to her when the project was complete, something which seemed to sadden him. The fact that the room which contained Gemma being his wife was the one which followed him speaking with Drummond was something that was rather fitting to the emotions that he was feeling. When the both of them were in Gemma's quarters together, we saw Dr. Mauer lied to Gemma and said that Mark had moved on and now had a daughter with somebody else because she'd been gone for a long time. I suppose that's the disorienting thing with Gemma. She doesn't truly know how long she's been there for because, for the most part, it's like her Severance chip is splitting off into multiple different personalities and she doesn't know how long she's within each one. This was why she hit Dr. Mauer with the chair and she tried to escape. I'd say the fact that the song I'll Be Seeing You was playing in the background of this scene, it did make me think that she was going to be escaping and getting outside. However, as we saw, when she went up the elevator, her mind went to being the personality of Miss Casey and she was disorientated as to why she was there. Plus, as she was walking away, Mr. Milchick was blocking the exit and he made her go down the export's elevator. Meaning that when she awoke as Gemma again, she was in tears and was heartbroken that she was still there, crying and whimpering the word Mark. Honestly, it broke my heart. Both Mark and Gemma were in mourning when they woke up, and we saw that the most with the final shot of the episode with it fading between them and them also being opposite one another. Plus, with them both being on each other's minds and them being in tears, it showed that they were both experiencing the same feeling. We still don't truly know the answer as to what is actually going on in exports and also what Cold Harbor is, but I definitely think it's to do with the pain and loss that both Mark and Gemma experienced together and how it could be vital in the creation of new life or maybe even cloning. Or maybe it could be to do with the sheer amount of personalities that Gemma was able to adopt whilst in exports and that it's something new that's going to be rolled out to the people. Either way, right now, it's just interesting to theorize. Outside of Gemma's involvement in exports, what was rather strange was that there was this mirrored version of MDR that almost mirrored the person that they were watching, such as Mark, Irving, Dylan, and Helly, and they were observing the other end of the screen that the person was on. This was something that probably connected to the fact that Lumen were always listening and watching over them. They had access to all of the cameras on the severed floor, the exports hallway, and also the inside of the subject through the data that they had. Was Mark now fully reintegrated? All throughout this episode, we saw that Mark was in a state where he was just experiencing his memories following him being passed out after going through his reintegration. When he awoke, we know that all he had going around in his head whilst in that state were the memories of being with Gemma due to the tear that was in his eye and the fact that he looked upset. We didn't find out if Mark had truly been reintegrated and if his Innie and Outy's memories were blended together as one, but I'm going to predict that he has been. Considering that Reg Harvey was confident with the procedure and also seeing as though in the previous episode all of the realities were merging, I think now, moving forward, we're going to have a Mark that's completely aware of both the inside and the outside. During this episode, there was a slightly different title sequence to usual, and this one actually had the two different versions of Mark within it, and the Innie and Outy's memories actually featuring as figures within it too. We also had the Innie and Outy looking like they were helping one another. So whilst we didn't explicitly find out if the reintegration was totally successful, I think this title sequence is a hint that we're going to be seeing a different kind of Mark moving forward, one that's equipped with a lot more information than what he once had. What I found particularly interesting was that we were almost seeing Mark's memories as if we were the Innie version of himself within this episode. As Innie Mark will now know all of what we witnessed, and it will definitely prove to be beneficial for him moving forward in his pursuit of finding Gemma in the exports hallway. With Dylan revealing that he had the location to the exports hallway due to the drawing, I think it seems like a rescue mission of some kind will definitely be on the horizon for Gemma as we draw towards the finale. I just wonder though, when Gemma was on the floor, she was her unsevered self. So I wonder if any of the trio get in the elevator down the hallway, if they'll awake in their Outy's form. This would be fine for Mark as he'd have all of the memories as one, but for the likes of Dylan or Helly, that would change things massively. My review of the episode. Just when I think the show couldn't get any better, it goes and delivers this episode, which I think outdid episode 4 of season 2 in becoming my favourite episode in the show. It was just such a beautiful episode that was also filled with heartbreak on every corner. Seeing the relationship that Mark and Gemma had on the outside for the first time was something that we needed, and only Severance could make us watch 16 episodes and make it worthwhile. I thought the effect that was used on the scenes of the memories gave it such a romanticized feel, and it encapsulated how your memories often do feel. They don't feel like these glossy clips that you play back, they have this of the time feel to them, and that's exactly what this episode gave us. This episode gave us so much whilst also telling us so little, and I admire it for that. Honestly, I felt like I walked away from that episode learning a lot, but in reality, I don't know much more at all. It just gave me the illusion that I did, but that's the beauty of it. When it came to the performances in this episode, it was mainly centered around Mark, Gemma, and Dr. Mauer, and wow, they each did incredible performances in their own right, and I'd even say that that creepy nurse that was chasing after Gemma served her purpose so well in just looking like a constant threat. Considering that we hadn't really ever seen much of Gemma in the show, I'd say that Deacon Lackman did a fantastic job. In fact, I think she actually stole the episode for me. Her performance was just so convincing and I was so emotionally engaged. Whether that be her polite nature that she had at the start and the emotionally shattering performance that she had at the end. I'd also say that Dr. Mauer was just so haunting too. Honestly, all of the actors did a great job in this episode and they delivered faultless performances. One thing that I absolutely loved was the score that was running throughout the heart of it, especially the ending. When Mark awoke after reliving him finding out that Gemma had died, it was just heartbreaking, and the music in the background supported that. It made me feel so emotional, and it almost reminded me of Siddharth Khalsa's work. He often works with Dan Fogelman and composed the music for This Is Us and Paradise, somebody that I think is just a master in encapsulating emotion. The fact that it also continued to play once the episode cut to black and the credits started rolling too, after witnessing such tension with Gemma throughout the entirety of the episode and feeling like she was gonna escape, it just left me with my head in my hands and also, like Mark, with a tear in my eye. Honestly, it was the best score of the season so far. One thing that we didn't find out about at the end of the episode though was if Devon called Harmony Cabell. We know that she was once Lumen through and through, as Reg Hubby said, but now with her turning her back on Lumen, I wonder if she'd be prepared to give Mark the answers that he desires. I really hope she does, because I'm so ready for her to have some kind of redemption arc. Also, Mr. Milchick, I'm so disappointed. I thought he was due to switch sides, but I guess it's not his time. So I'm still holding out for that. With only 3 episodes to go until the end of the season, it's so difficult to guess how the season's going to end. I'd probably say it's been one of the best singular seasons of TV in such a long time, and I can't wait to see how it's going to conclude. So, there you have it, Severance Season 2 Episode 7 Ending Explained. If you want to see more breakdowns on episodes of Severance Season 2, then click on the card in the top corner, there'll be a playlist there. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a video. What did you think of this episode? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for tuning into this week's Severance Breakdown, and I'll see you in the next one.